The unexpected warning. Captain Jarek's mind raced as he stood before the holographic display, watching the fading image of Admiral Jensen. His eyes narrowed with suspicion. There was no way that the humans, with their outdated technology, could have detected them so easily. Earth was a world barely capable of launching spacecraft beyond their moon, let alone tracking a highly advanced alien vessel like the Nova Vanguard. Yet here they were, face to face with a human military official, communicating with a level of precision and authority that suggested far more than what was immediately visible. "Something's not right," Jarek muttered, tapping his fingers on the armrest of his command chair. His blue skin seemed to glow in the soft lighting of the bridge, his 4 eyes scanning the control panels in front of him. He was a seasoned commander used to dealing with the unexpected, but this felt different. Earth, a primitive world by galactic standards, had just outsmarted him. He couldn't ignore that. Lyra, standing by the ship's navigation console, glanced at him with a hint of unease. "Captain, I've been running simulations," she said, her voice tight. "The defense systems on the planet's surface, they're unlike anything we've encountered before. It's as though they've anticipated our every move." Anticipated? How could they? Jarek shot back, his tone incredulous. "Their technology barely reaches the stars. The Empire has known about Earth for centuries, and no one has ever mentioned anything like this. Perhaps they've been hiding their advancements," Lyra suggested, her voice laced with curiosity. "Maybe they've been holding back on purpose, or maybe there's something we missed during our scans." The tension on the bridge was palpable. The Nova Vanguard was one of the most advanced ships in the Galactic Empire, equipped with state-of-the-art cloaking technology, advanced weapons, and stealth systems. Yet Earth had managed to detect them without effort. It felt as though they had been watched the entire time, their every movement tracked by an unknown force. Jarek leaned forward, hands gripping the console. What's their next move? Did they offer us a chance to negotiate? Lyra shook her head. No, they've activated their planetary defense grid. If we don't retreat immediately, we'll be in violation of their space laws. Jarek's mind raced. He knew the Empire's stance on the Earth. The Council of Elders had always considered Earth to be of little importance. Just another primitive planet in the galaxy, unworthy of conquest. It had been left untouched by the Empire's expansion, left alone to grow and develop at its own pace. But now, Earth was making its stand. Admiral Jensen's warning echoed in Jarek's mind. Leave now, or face the consequences. He wasn't sure what those consequences might be, but it was clear that Earth was not a world that could be easily intimidated. The ship's sensors beeped again, snapping Jarek out of his thoughts. "Captain," Lyra said, pointing to the display. "They've activated a new signal. It's being transmitted from a city on Earth's surface. The signal's encrypted, but the human fleet is mobilizing." Jarek stood up, his eyes narrowing. "Mobilizing? Are they sending reinforcements?" Sitz was determined to see this through. Lyra nodded grimly. "It looks like it. They have a fleet of their own, hidden from our initial scans. Whatever they have, it's enough to make them feel confident." The captain paced in front of the view screen, his mind racing. This was no longer just a simple scouting mission. Earth had shown they were not only capable of defending their world, but also of hiding their true potential. Jarek had underestimated them, and now they were ready to fight back. "Activate the cloaking system," Jarek ordered. "We need to disappear from their sensors. Let's see what we're dealing with before we make any decisions." As Lyra worked quickly, the ship's cloaking field enveloped the Nova Vanguard, turning it invisible to Earth's sensors. The crew fell into an eerie silence, awaiting further instructions. Jarek's thoughts were consumed with one burning question. How had Earth managed to hide such advanced technology for so long? What else were they capable of? His mind flickered back to the Admiral's warning. The human had not been afraid. In fact, he had sounded more certain of his victory than Jarek had ever expected. It was almost as if the humans knew they could hold their ground against a fleet of the Empire's most powerful ships. What had Earth been hiding? Captain. Lyra spoke again, breaking his train of thought. We're receiving a new message. It's not from the Admiral. It's from a civilian source. Jarek turned to face her, his curiosity piqued. A civilian? He had never encountered a scenario where civilians could communicate with the Galactic Empire. Earth had been isolated, distant, and irrelevant. Until now. What's the message? Lyra hesitated for a moment before reading the transmission aloud. To the visitors from beyond. We know you're watching. We know you can hear us. But we won't be intimidated. Earth is not afraid of the Galactic Empire. You were warned. Now leave, or you will regret it. Jarek stood frozen, the weight of the words sinking in. This wasn't just a defense of their planet. This was a statement. Earth was willing to stand up to the Empire. For the first time, Jarek realized the full scope of what was happening. The humans were not only capable of defending their home, they were determined to keep it free from outsiders, no matter the cost. Lyra, he said slowly, a new resolve hardening in his voice. Prepare the ship. We're not leaving yet. But Captain, Lyra protested, the Admiral's warning. I heard it, Jarek interrupted, and I heard enough. It's time we learn exactly what Earth is capable of. If they want to stand against the Galactic Empire, they'll have to prove it. The tension in the air was thick as the crew braced for whatever was coming next. Jarek knew this was no longer a simple reconnaissance mission. This was a turning point for both the Empire and Earth. The fate of both worlds now rested on what happened next. And Jarek, despite his doubt, the hidden resistance. The Nova Vanguard drifted silently through the fringes of Earth's atmosphere, cloaked under its advanced stealth technology. The immense ship, a marvel of the Galactic Empire's engineering, had become nothing more than a shadow in the vast expanse above the planet. Captain Jarek stood at the command deck, his mind churning with questions. The human message had struck him in a way he hadn't anticipated. Not just their defiance, but the underlying certainty in their words. It was clear they weren't just defending their home. They were prepared for something more. Captain. Lyra's voice broke through his thoughts. I've completed an analysis of the message we received. There's something off about it. Jarek turned toward her, his expression hardening. What do you mean? There's no trace of the usual civilian insignia. Lyra continued, her fingers flying over her console. The encryption is too advanced for a mere civilian. This wasn't a random transmission. It came from a highly secure military-grade network. Whoever sent it knew exactly what they were doing. Jarek's brow furrowed as he processed her words. A civilian transmission, yet encoded with military-level encryption. The implications were staggering. A resistance, he murmured, half to himself. Exactly, Lyra replied. Whoever sent that message had access to technology far beyond what Earth's public defenses can handle. It suggests there's more going on here than we thought. Jarek paced slowly, his mind racing. The Empire had underestimated Earth, and now it seemed Earth was ready to show just how much they had hidden. We need to learn more. We can't simply leave without understanding what we're dealing with. He paused, his thoughts turning to the Admiral's warning. Leave now, or face the consequences. There's no turning back now. Lyra hesitated before continuing. Captain, I've been running scans of Earth's military bases, looking for anything that might explain this sudden leap in technology. There's one facility, deep underground, that stands out. It's not in any of the Empire's public intelligence reports. But based on the encrypted signal we received, I'm willing to bet it's connected to this mysterious resistance. Jarek's gaze sharpened. Prepare a shuttle. We're going down there. Lyra raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised. Sir, you mean to land on Earth? Without orders from the Council? Fats. I'm not asking for permission, Lieutenant. Jarek interrupted, his voice calm but firm. We need answers, and the best place to get them is from the source. Earth's surface may be primitive, but there's something else here, something we've missed. I'm going down, and I'm going to find out what it is." Lyra nodded reluctantly, but she knew better than to argue further. She quickly began preparing the shuttle for launch. Hours later, Jarek stood at the edge of the shuttle's hatch, peering down through the viewports at the sprawling landscape below. The surface of Earth was more vibrant than he had expected. Lush forests, sprawling oceans, and cities that seemed to hum with energy. It was hard to believe that such a seemingly innocent planet could house such a potent resistance. Yet here he was, about to venture into the unknown, not as an invader, but as a seeker of truth. The shuttle's descent was smooth, cutting through the atmosphere like a phantom. As they approached the coordinates provided by Lyra's scans, Jarek's heart rate quickened. This facility was buried in a mountain range, shrouded by dense forests and vast, uninhabited areas. It didn't appear on any maps, not even the most classified Empire maps. How had Earth managed to hide something so crucial from their watchful eyes? "There," Lyra said, pointing to a break in the dense canopy. Below, nestled in the mountain's heart, was the entrance to an underground complex, stealthy, hidden, and well-protected. The shuttle touched down, its engines humming to a quiet stop. Jarek stood up, straightening his uniform, preparing for whatever awaited him inside the facility. He wasn't sure what he would find, but one thing was certain. Earth was not as weak and unprepared as the Empire had thought. The shuttle doors hissed open, and Jarek stepped out, the cool air of Earth brushing against his skin. He could hear the distant rustle of the forest, the chirping of unknown creatures, but there was no sign of immediate danger. The hidden facility was a silent behemoth, its blackened walls blending seamlessly with the surrounding landscape. Lyra followed closely behind him, her boots crunching on the earth as they made their way to the entrance. A hidden security checkpoint stood before them, a solitary guard standing motionless in front of an enormous, heavily reinforced door. He wore no insignia, no markings that would indicate his allegiance to any particular force, but there was something in the way he stood, the stillness of his posture, that told Jarek this man was no ordinary soldier. As Jarek approached, the guard's eyes locked with his, and for a moment, neither moved. It was a silent standoff, two beings from different worlds, each sizing up the other. Then, slowly, the guard spoke, his voice low and measured. "You're not supposed to be here." Jarek met his gaze, unflinching. "Neither are you. But here we are." The guard didn't move for a moment, then gave a slight nod, as if acknowledging something unsaid. He pressed a hidden panel beside the door, and it opened with a soft hiss, revealing a long, dimly lit hallway that seemed to stretch far beyond the visible space. "Follow me," the guard instructed, turning without waiting for a response. They walked in silence through the corridors, the only sounds their footsteps echoing off the walls. The atmosphere was tense, and Jarek couldn't help but feel the weight of the situation pressing on him. This was no longer just about Earth's defenses. It was about a hidden power that had the potential to disrupt everything the Empire stood for. As they reached the heart of the facility, the guard stopped in front of an imposing door. He looked back at Jarek and Lyra, his expression unreadable. "This is as far as I go," he said. "The rest of the answers are inside." The door slid open, revealing a massive chamber filled with holographic displays, data terminals, and a group of humans huddled together. They didn't look like soldiers or scientists. They looked like ordinary people, workers and civilians, some of them young, some elderly. Yet the way they moved, the quiet confidence in their eyes, suggested they knew far more than they let on. At the center of the room stood a woman, her back turned to them, overlooking a large holographic map of Earth. She was tall, with short-cropped dark hair and a sharp, focused expression. When she turned, Jarek saw something that took him by surprise, an insignia on her uniform, a symbol that was strangely familiar. It was the emblem of the Galactic Empire. "You've been looking for answers, Captain," she said, her voice calm, but there was an unmistakable intensity in her words. "And now, you have them. The hidden truth. The room was charged with an electric tension as Jarek stared at the woman who had just spoken. The insignia on her uniform, unmistakably from the Galactic Empire, was something Jarek had never expected to see in a place like this. A high-ranking officer within Earth's resistance, wearing the mark of the very empire that had oppressed her people. It defied all logic. How could someone of her caliber have turned against everything she was once loyal to? Jarek was about to speak when the woman raised her hand, silencing him before the first words could escape his lips. "You have questions," she said, her tone steady but piercing. "I understand that. But first, let me assure you that what you've seen here today is only a fraction of what Earth has hidden from your empire. And it's time for you to know the truth." The room fell into a hushed silence, broken only by the faint hum of the holographic systems around them. Jarek exchanged a look with Lyra, who was standing just behind him, her expression a mix of curiosity and wariness. This was no longer just a reconnaissance mission. This was something much larger. Jarek took a step forward. "I'm listening," he said, trying to hide the unease in his voice. He'd seen enough betrayals and deceptions to know that there was always more beneath the surface, but nothing in his training could have prepared him for what he was about to hear. The woman nodded and motioned for them to sit at a table near the center of the room. As they settled in, she took a seat across from them, locking eyes with Jarek. "Let's start with the basics," she said, her voice even but with an underlying bitterness. "You think Earth is a backward, primitive species, don't you? You think we're nothing more than a colony to be used for resources and controlled by your empire. But Earth has been hiding something from the galaxy for a long time." Jarek opened his mouth to protest, but she held up a hand, stopping him. "You're right about one thing. We're primitive compared to your empire, and we've been at war for centuries, struggling to survive under your rule. But what you don't know is that Earth wasn't always like this. It was once a powerful force in the galaxy, a world that rivaled the great empires you serve. But thousands of years ago, during the Great Exodus, we were forced into isolation. We hid our most powerful weapons, our technology, and the knowledge of how to use it. Only a few select people knew the truth, and they made sure it stayed hidden." Jarek felt his pulse quicken. The Great Exodus was a term used by ancient galactic historians to refer to a mysterious, almost mythical exodus of human colonies from the known galaxy. It was a time shrouded in legend, with little evidence to support the rumors. But now, hearing the woman speak so matter-of-factly about it, Jarek couldn't ignore the gravity of what she was saying. She continued, "For centuries, the Empire believed Earth was a backwater world with no significant resources or military might. But in reality, we've been watching you, learning your weaknesses, and building up our defenses. We've kept ourselves hidden in plain sight, using our technological advancements in secret, waiting for the right moment." The room seemed to grow colder as the implications of her words sank in. The woman was speaking with an intensity that suggested she knew far more than just Earth's hidden capabilities. There was something much deeper at play here, something that could shake the very foundations of the Empire. "We've been preparing for this moment," she continued. "And you, Captain, are a key part of it." Jarek raised an eyebrow. "Me? How?" "You've been sent here to Earth by your superiors, tasked with a mission to wipe us out, to crush any form of resistance. But what you don't understand is that you're walking into a trap. This was never about just Earth. It was about the entire galaxy. And you're part of a much larger game than you realize." Jarek's heart pounded as he tried to make sense of her words. Was she threatening him? Or was she speaking the truth? If Earth truly had been hiding something this significant, it could change everything. It could challenge the Empire's dominance, disrupt the delicate balance of power across the galaxy. "You're saying the resistance is just the beginning," Jarek said slowly, his mind racing. "That Earth has been preparing for something bigger. But why not tell the galaxy? Why keep all of this hidden?" The woman's eyes narrowed, and she leaned forward slightly. "Because we couldn't. We didn't have the strength. We needed to build an army. To ensure that when the time came, the galaxy would not be unprepared. Now we have what we need. The technology, the weapons, the knowledge. And soon, the Empire will be forced to confront us, whether it's ready or not. Jarek leaned back, absorbing the weight of her words. This is madness. If Earth had the power to challenge the Empire, why wait until now? Why risk everything for a war that could destroy you? The woman's expression softened, just slightly, as if she understood the question all too well. Because we needed the right moment. We couldn't afford to make mistakes. And we needed someone like you to see what was really happening. Jarek's mind was reeling, but something in her words struck a chord. Earth wasn't just trying to survive anymore. They were planning something far grander. A resistance was just the start. What they had in mind was far beyond anything the Empire had prepared for. The woman stood up, signaling the end of their conversation. I know this is a lot to take in, Captain, but you have a choice now. You can return to your ship and tell your superiors everything you've learned. Or, she paused, locking eyes with him again. You can stay. Join us. Help us fight for something bigger than yourself. Help us end the tyranny of the Empire once and for all. Lyra's eyes flicked toward Jarek, a mixture of uncertainty and hope in her gaze. Jarek himself stood there torn. The Empire had been his life, his purpose. But what if this was the moment he'd been waiting for? Something that would define his legacy, that could alter the fate of the galaxy. I need time, Jarek said, his voice low. He wasn't sure if he was talking to her or to himself. The woman nodded. Time is something you don't have much of anymore, Captain. But take it if you must. Just know this. The war has already begun, and soon you will have to choose a side. The Empire or Earth's future. As Jarek and Lyra left the room, the weight of her words hung heavy in the air. The complex that once seemed like a trap now felt like the beginning of something much bigger. Earth had its secrets, and now Jarek had a decision to make. The tipping point. Jarek stood on the balcony of the Resistance's hidden base, staring out at the vast expanse of Earth below. The city lights flickered in the distance, but the moon hung high above, its silvery glow reflecting off the empty streets. It was a world that seemed so familiar, yet so foreign now. Every step he had taken in the last few days had led him farther away from the life he had known. The Empire, his mission, his loyalty. It was a difficult truth to reconcile. Earth, the planet he had been taught to view as a backwater world, was not what he had thought. It was far more complicated, more dangerous than he could ever have imagined. The woman in the control room had shown him glimpses of the vast conspiracy that had been brewing on this planet for centuries, and with each revelation, his understanding of the galaxy and his place in it shattered a little more. The choice laid heavy on his shoulders. Return to the Empire with the information he had, or stay and fight alongside the Resistance. To join Earth, to abandon the Empire, meant rejecting everything he had worked for. He had trained his whole life to serve the Empire, to fight for their vision of order and progress. But now, in the quiet of this moment, he was beginning to question whether that vision was worth preserving. Behind him, the sound of footsteps broke the silence. Lyra stepped out, her silhouette framed by the doorway. Her presence was steady, almost calming, but the tension between them had been growing since their conversation with the woman. She, too, had heard the same information, but her reaction was different. Where Jarek was torn, Lyra seemed resolute, certain of the path ahead. "You've been standing here for hours," she said, her voice soft but firm. "I know you're trying to figure this out. We all are. But standing still won't help us move forward." Jarek turned toward her, his expression pained. "I don't know what to do, Lyra. Everything I've been taught tells me that the Empire is the future. They're the ones who bring order, peace. But now I see the truth. The Empire isn't what I thought it was. Earth isn't what I thought it was. I don't know if I can make this decision." Lyra stepped closer, her gaze unwavering. "You're not alone in this. We're all struggling with what we've learned. But we've been given a choice, Jarek. We're no longer bound by the lies. This isn't just about Earth's future. It's about the galaxy. The Empire's vision of order is built on oppression, on control. They've been taking more than they need, destroying worlds, and erasing cultures. If we don't stop them, who will? Her words cut through the confusion swirling in his mind. For a moment, Jarek thought he saw the very conviction in her eyes that had driven him to the Empire in the first place. A belief in something greater than oneself, a cause that justified everything. But now, that belief was being tested, and he wasn't sure if he could stand by Earth's cause, just as he wasn't sure he could stand by the Empire's. We all want peace, Jarek, Lyra continued, her voice more gentle now. But the peace the Empire promises is just a mask for its cruelty. They will never allow us to live freely. Earth has been oppressed for centuries, and now we have a chance to change that. But we can't do it alone. We need people who understand both sides. People like you. Her words echoed in his mind, and he felt a surge of conflicting emotions. The Empire had been his family, his purpose. But what Lyra was saying, it made sense. The more he thought about the Empire's actions, the more the cracks in their supposed utopia became visible. There were too many stories he had heard of entire colonies being wiped out, of voices being silenced, of planets being drained for their resources, and now hearing Earth's side. He was beginning to see just how much the Empire had hidden. "What do you expect me to do, Lyra?" Jarek asked, his voice quieter now. "I can't just walk away from everything I've known. My rank, my future, those are things I've worked for. I can't betray all of it." Lyra placed a hand on his shoulder, grounding him. "No one's asking you to betray yourself. You don't have to turn your back on everything. You can use what you know, what you've learned, to help us. The Empire might be strong, but they're not invincible. We've been gathering allies from all over the galaxy. The longer we stay hidden, the more powerful we become. And if we're going to make a difference, we need people like you." Jarek looked at her, searching her face for any sign of doubt. But there was none. She believed in this cause. She believed in him. And in that moment, he realized that he too wanted to believe. He wanted to fight for something more than just a war that would never end. He wanted to fight for a future where people didn't have to live in fear, where freedom was more than just a dream. Before he could say anything more, a voice came over the comm system, urgent and sharp. "Captain, we have a problem." It was the woman from the control room. Her voice was tense, a stark contrast to the calm in which Jarek had been mulling over his decision. "What's happening?" Jarek asked, already moving toward the door, Lyra by his side. "We've received intel from one of our agents," the woman replied, her voice crackling with static. "The Empire's fleet is moving toward Earth. They've discovered our location, and they've launched a full-scale assault. We don't have much time. The countdown has already begun." Jarek's stomach twisted in a way he hadn't expected. The weight of the decision he had been avoiding crashed down on him. This was no longer just a theoretical fight. The Empire was coming. The battle was no longer distant. It was here. "We need to act, Jarek," Lyra said, her voice steady despite the urgency in her eyes. "The choice is clear now. You don't have time to sit on the fence. If you're going to stand with us, now's the time." He glanced over at her, then back at the looming threat on the horizon. The moment of reckoning had arrived. "I'm with you," Jarek said, his voice full of resolve. The decision had been made. He would stand with Earth, with Lyra, with the Resistance. The fight had begun, and there was no turning back. The reckoning. The roar of the engines reverberated through the base as Jarek hurried to the command center. The Resistance's last line of defense was about to be tested in ways none of them had imagined. Earth, the planet that had once seemed like a forgotten speck in the galaxy, was now at the center of a war that would decide the fate of billions. The Empire had found them, and the clock was ticking. Lyra walked beside him, her face a mask of determination. She had seen these kinds of situations before, had lived through countless battles and confrontations with the Empire. But even she couldn't mask the gravity of this moment. They were about to face the might of a galactic empire, and they had no idea if they would survive. When they entered the command room, the atmosphere was tense. Engineers, strategists, and soldiers were all moving in a flurry of activity, finalizing plans and executing emergency protocols. Maps of Earth's surface were projected on screens, showing every major city, military base, and potential target. The woman from the control room was standing by the central console, eyes scanning the data as if she could will a solution to appear. "Jarek, Lyra," she said without looking up. "The Empire's fleet is closer than we thought. They're in orbit now, and we've only got a few hours before they launch an assault. They're not here for a peaceful negotiation. This is going to be a full-scale invasion." Jarek felt the weight of her words settle into his chest. He had expected this, of course. He had known that the Empire would not simply let the Resistance thrive. But hearing it, seeing the calculated response of the Resistance forces, made it all too real. The battle was no longer just an abstract concept. It was happening. "Have you contacted the other cells?" Lyra asked, her voice firm despite the anxiety that clung to the air. The woman nodded. "We've sent word to the underground cells around the world. They're preparing for coordinated strikes, but many of them are scattered. Some are already compromised. If we don't do something now, we'll be picked off one by one." Jarek's mind raced. His thoughts were a whirlwind of tactical maneuvers, strategic decisions, and his own moral reckoning. The Empire's forces were vast, and their resources far exceeded those of the Resistance. But that didn't mean they were invincible. If the Resistance could force the Empire to fight on multiple fronts, they might stand a chance. Lyra caught his eye. "We have to fight smart, Jarek. We can't just rely on brute force. We've got to strike where it hurts." Jarek nodded, stepping forward to the central console. His mind, honed by years of service in the Empire, began to form a plan. He had spent years analyzing their tactics, their weaknesses. Now, it was time to use that knowledge against them. "We can't engage the entire fleet head-on," Jarek said, his voice calm as he looked at the battle maps. "But we can disrupt their supply lines, their communications. If we cripple their coordination, we'll force them into a reactive position. We need to hit them where they're weakest, underestimate the Resistance, and they'll make mistakes." Lyra raised an eyebrow. "You're suggesting we go after their command centers, disrupt their operations in orbit?" Jarek nodded. "Exactly. If we can cut off their ability to coordinate, we can create chaos on the ground. The longer we keep them off balance, the better our chances of survival." The woman from the control room looked up from the console, her expression thoughtful. "We've already begun coordinating sabotage operations on the ground, but we'll need access to their satellite network to disrupt their communications on a planetary scale. The problem is, the Empire's defense grid is sophisticated. We'd need a direct hit to disable it." Jarek glanced over at Lyra. She seemed to be processing the plan. "I can do it," Jarek said, his voice steady. "I know their systems. I can get close enough to bypass their security protocols and trigger the shutdown." Lyra looked at him, uncertainty flickering in her eyes for the briefest moment. "Are you sure? If you go in alone, I'll be fine," Jarek interrupted. "I've done this kind of work before. The Empire's systems might be advanced, but I know how they think. I know their vulnerabilities." Lyra hesitated for a moment before nodding. "All right, but don't take any unnecessary risks." The woman at the console gave a curt nod. "We'll provide you with a route to their central command satellite, but time is of the essence. If we don't act before their assault begins, we won't stand a chance." Jarek turned to leave, but Lyra caught his arm. "Jarek," she said quietly, "whatever happens, I'm glad you made the choice to stand with us. We wouldn't be here without you." His gaze softened. He had never expected to find a family here, not after everything he had left behind. But in this Resistance, he had found something that transcended duty. It was a sense of belonging, of fighting for a future that could be better than the one the Empire had promised. "I won't let you down," Jarek said, and with that, he left the room. The air was cold as Jarek made his way to the underground launch bay, the thrum of energy pulsing through the walls. He was suited in the Resistance's modified armor, sleek and efficient, but it was the tools of his trade, the data disruptors and EMP charges, that gave him confidence. He had spent years perfecting his skills as a hacker, an infiltrator, and now he would use everything he had learned to turn the tide of this war. Lyra had given him a quick embrace before he left, and it had grounded him. There was no turning back now. He stepped into the ship, a small, stealthy vessel designed for infiltration. It was designed to get in and out without being noticed, to make the most of every advantage. As the engines roared to life, Jarek's heart pounded in his chest. This was it, the moment he had been preparing for, whether he had known it or not. The ship shot through the atmosphere, the world below shrinking as the pull of the Empire's fleet began to loom closer. Jarek's mind was focused on the mission, but a part of him couldn't help but feel the weight of what this decision had meant. The Empire had been his family. His loyalty had been unwavering. But now, with every passing second, he could feel his past life slipping away. The choice was final. He had chosen this. As he approached the Empire's central satellite, the magnitude of the task before him became clear. The station was surrounded by a web of defensive barriers, and it was heavily guarded. But Jarek had faced similar odds before. He knew the Empire's security was more about appearances than true invulnerability. Every system, every defense, had a flaw, a crack that could be exploited. He activated the cloaking system on his ship, and for a moment, everything was silent. He was invisible to the Empire's sensors, moving through their defense grid undetected. The station loomed ahead, a massive structure with walls covered in armored plating. The security was tight, but the main access point, a maintenance hatch on the far side, was lightly guarded. It was the perfect point of entry. Jarek exhaled slowly. He had done this 100 times before. He had infiltrated Imperial facilities, bypassed security, and hacked into systems. But this time, there was more on the line. Earth was counting on him. The Resistance was counting on him. He maneuvered the ship into position and landed near the maintenance hatch. His heart raced as he exited the ship, moving swiftly through the shadows. The guards patrolling the station were few, their movements predictable. Jarek used his skills to neutralize them silently, his actions quick and precise. Each step was calculated, each motion deliberate. He couldn't afford mistakes now. Finally, he reached the control room. The central system was just ahead. But as he stepped closer, something unexpected happened. A voice echoed through the corridor, cold and menacing. "Captain Jarek, I knew you would come." It was a voice he recognized, one that sent a chill down his spine. "Commander Horan," Jarek said, his voice low. "I should have known you'd be here." Horan stepped into view, a cruel smile on his face. "You always were predictable. You're a good soldier, Jarek, but you've made a grave mistake. The Empire doesn't forgive traitors." Jarek's pulse quickened. His old commander, the man who had taught him everything about loyalty, about duty, was standing in front of him, and he was ready to do whatever it took to stop him.